Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The death toll from the coronavirus pandemic has surpassed 5,000 in Europe as worldwide fatalities surged to over 11,000. Italy has reported 627 deaths in 24 hours, taking the total to 4,032, while over 1,300 people have died in Spain. More in this report.
Governments around the world are increasingly adopting sweeping measures to stem the spread of the new coronavirus. Jordan has imposed a lockdown in the country starting from today to combat COVID-19. Colombia has also announced a compulsory general confinement from Tuesday until April 13. Meanwhile, in China, restrictions on movement are being eased gradually as it reported 0 local coronavirus cases for the third consecutive day. Zimbabwe has reported its first case, while Singapore says 2 patients of the new coronavirus have died, marking its first fatalities from the virus.
2 patients in our National Center for Infectious Diseases have passed away this morning due to complications arising from COVID-19 infection, despite the best efforts of our medical team to care for them. Our thoughts are with their families and their loved ones during this difficult moment.
A number of airlines across the world have suspended their operations, but despite all restrictions, many citizens continue to travel. The World Health Organization has warned that the young people are not immune from the coronavirus and must avoid socializing.
Today, I have a message for young people. You're not invincible. This virus could put you in hospital for weeks or even kill you. Even if you don't get sick, the choices you make about where you go could be the difference between life and death for someone else.
The vaccine for the deadly infection has not been made yet, but the WHO says 20 vaccines against the coronavirus are currently being developed worldwide.
Pakistan has suspended all international flight operations for 2 weeks in a bid to contain the coronavirus pandemic. The decision comes as the number of the confirmed coronavirus cases in the country rises to over 530 with 3 deaths. In a statement, the Civil Aviation Authority said only cargo and diplomatic flights will be allowed. It said that the restriction applies to all flight carriers, not just the Pakistan International Airlines. The authorities said the PIA will be allowed to bring back its planes. The government has advised people to stay at home and follow social distancing measures to contain the outbreak. Health authorities in Palestine, Oman, Lebanon and Kuwait have reported new cases of the novel coronavirus. In a statement, the Palestinian health minister said 4 new cases were recorded in the West Bank. This takes the total infections in the occupied territory to 52, including 17 recoveries. However, the Gaza Strip has not reported any infection as of yet. In Oman, the health ministry reported 4 new infections, taking the total cases to 52. The Lebanese health ministry said the country's total coronavirus cases rose to 187 after 24 new infections were recorded. Kuwait's health ministry said 17 new cases were reported, bringing the total infections to 176. Meanwhile, the UAE has announced the deaths of 2 coronavirus patients, the first such fatalities to be reported in the country. In the US, more than 70 million people in 3 major states have been locked down in a bid to stop the spread of the new coronavirus pandemic. After California, the governors of the states of New York and Illinois issued immediate stay-at-home orders. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo says the outbreak threat is real and they have to overcome it. He said all workers in non-essential businesses must stay home while all gatherings will be banned in the state. Earlier, President Donald Trump ruled out a nationwide lockdown despite 14,400 confirmed cases and 218 deaths in the country. Brazil has declared a state of emergency across the country to tackle the health and economic crisis stemming from the novel coronavirus pandemic. Brazil's health minister says the country's health system could collapse by the end of April. How are the other South American countries preparing to face the challenge? This report has the details.
Governments across the South American continent are bracing for the impact of COVID-19. Colombia's President Iván Duque has announced a nationwide 19-day quarantine from Tuesday after 158 confirmed cases of infection so far. Meanwhile, Mexico is trying to limit the fallout of restrictions as the U.S. closed the shared border to non-essential travel. In Peru, President Martin Vizcarra has appointed Victor Zamora as new health minister after the country reported 4 deaths on Friday.
The Health Minister, Elizabeth Henostroza, has taken on a large undertaking, her professionalism for her work in this emergency that started months ago. We thank her for her work and efforts, but following a thorough evaluation of the situation, we have been obliged to take the decision to replace this post with another professional.
Chile's President Sebastián Piñera is under pressure to follow neighboring Argentina in announcing a national quarantine after reporting 434 cases. Meanwhile, Chilean airline LATAM's CEO, Roberto Alvo, said the airline is operating at only 30% capacity and workers' wages have been halved. Following the Chilean government's refusal to offer a rescue plan, LATAM's shares fell 44% on the stock market.
This decrease in operation will mean a significant drop in our income and will affect the liquidity of the company. To mitigate this impact, we have also halted all investments, suspended all hires, and cut all non-absolutely necessary expenses. We are committed to trying to take care of the jobs of each of our people, and we are analyzing any initiative that prevents, as far as possible, employee departures.
The Development Bank of Latin America has opened $2.5 billion line of credit to help member countries fight the coronavirus. The new measure is in addition to the $300 million credit line announced at the start of the month.
Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has urged American citizens to call on their government to lift sanctions amid the coronavirus pandemic. In a statement, Rouhani said many ordinary Iranians have lost their health, jobs and income due to the U.S. curbs. He said it is time for the Americans to ask their government for answers and not allow their history to be blackened further. Rouhani said the war on COVID-19 can only be successful if all the nations work together for its containment. The president warned that under a pandemic situation, Tehran, Paris, London and Washington are not far apart. Rouhani said the surrounding oceans of a continent are not an adequate defense for the U.S. in this pandemic. Iran says it has exchanged a prisoner with France after Paris released an Iranian detained over violations of U.S. sanctions against Tehran. Iranian state media says Tehran has returned a French academic held on security charges after Paris freed an Iranian engineer. It said French government released the Iranian despite French court's decision to extradite him to the U.S. The media said Paris freed the prisoner in an act of mutual cooperation after Tehran showed the intention to release a French citizen. France has been asking Iran to release 2 French researchers, Fariba Adelkar and Roland Marshall, detained in 2019. Iran has also carried out prisoner exchanges with the US, Australia and Germany in recent months. Seoul says Pyongyang has fired 2 short-range projectiles from Pyongyang province towards the east coast of the Korean peninsula. In a statement, South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff said such actions must be ceased and are highly inappropriate amid the COVID-19 crisis. Meanwhile, Japan's cabinet secretariat said it detected at least one projectile, but it presumably had not reached Tokyo's territorial waters. This is North Korea's 3rd launch of short-range missiles and projectiles this month. The UAE's branch of the Red Crescent says 2 of its aid workers have been killed in Yemen after unknown armed men kidnapped them in Aden. In a tweet, the body said its workers were killed in one of the world's most vulnerable humanitarian zones. Yemen's south has been a conflicted zone between government forces and the separatists. The 2 parties signed a power-sharing agreement in Riyadh last November with little sign of implementation on the ground. Tens of thousands of people, mostly civilians, have been killed in Yemen's conflict and millions displaced since 2015. Damascus says Russian President Vladimir Putin called his Syrian counterpart Bashar al-Assad to discuss the developments of the Idlib ceasefire. State media says the violations committed by the rebels were also discussed during the call. In a statement, the Kremlin said both the leaders discussed the promotion of the political process within the framework of the Syrian Constitutional Committee. It said the leaders also discussed issues related to rendering humanitarian assistance to Syria. According to the statement, the two sides agreed to continue contacts at different levels. Earlier, Turkey and Russia reached a ceasefire agreement on Syria's northwest Idlib on 5th of March. Turkey says it has killed 2 militants of the Kurdistan Workers Party in northern Syria. The defense ministry says the fighters were killed during Operation Peace Spring. The ministry said it will not stop the operations against the militants in the region. Turkey launched a trio of operations across its border into northern Syria in 2016. Ankara holds the fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year-long terror campaign. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. An Indian activist, Amulya Malik, is jailed for over a month for raising a pro-Pakistan slogan in a rally. The 19-year-old has been charged with sedition for chanting "Long Live Pakistan" on 20th of February. The Bengaluru police arrested her after ruling Bharatiya Janata Party and Hindu extremists called her anti-national. Amulya is booked under treachery charges of Indian Penal Code for showing disaffection towards the government of India. The maximum punishment under these sections could go up to a life sentence. Her lawyers have since moved a bail application, and the matter will be heard on 24th of March. India's internet ban has hit the health sector in occupied Kashmir hard as Valley reports its first coronavirus case. The occupied territory has been reeling under curfew and a complete shutdown for the last 230 days. Kashmiri doctors and health workers have asked the Indian government to end the communications blackout to counter the epidemic. They said the human security and health of the people of the valley must not be kept hostage to the so-called security of the state. The medics said the outbreak of COVID-19 in the valley is a potential explosion waiting to happen. They said it is absolutely necessary the internet is restored in the valley before the outbreak becomes uncontrollable. The US and Mexico have agreed to restrict non-essential travel across their border in an effort to limit the spread of COVID-19. President Donald Trump announced that his administration will invoke a health-focused statute to block migrants from entering the US illegally. The non-essential travel measures will also restrict tourism at the border. Mexico's Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard said trade, work and medical trips will not be restricted at the border. He said the measures against illegal immigration mean Washington can rapidly return Central Americans and Mexican migrants it arrests. A US official said the restrictions would not impact rail or trucking shipments across the border. So far, the US has many more confirmed coronavirus cases and deaths than Mexico. The United States has long loved its drive-ins and drive-thrus for movies, fast food, pharmacies, and banking. Now the coronavirus pandemic has added a new one, Catholic confessions. More in this report.
A U.S. pastor is offering drive-thru confessions in a parking lot. With his church closed due to the COVID-19 outbreak, Scott Homer turned to the tried and tested method in this nation of car lovers. Every day, except Sunday, he sits on a wooden chair in his priestly robes in the parking lot outside his Maryland chapel and does a contact-free confession and blessing.
More open air, so there's like airflow and all that good stuff. And then we always keep that 6-foot distance, and I keep them in their cars. I say you got to stay in your cars because I don't want groups to form. You know what I mean? And there can be a transmission there. So it's a weird thing where you got to think about the spiritual and the physical at the same time.
2 lines of traffic cones and a sign guide cars outside the St. Edward's Church in Bowie, a small town around 30 kilometers outside Washington. Drivers lower their windows and confess their sins to Father Homer.
Key is to keep the seal of the confession. You know what I mean? You don't want people to overhear each other, so we got to keep cars a certain distance. So traffic management has probably been the biggest logistical issue.
Despite the drive-thru's all-American pedigree, Father Homer came up with the idea last week after seeing South Korea organize drive-thru tests for the coronavirus.
In Hong Kong, a subway operator has deployed a fleet of robots to help disinfect its trains and stations in the face of the new coronavirus pandemic. These robots are capable of autonomously rolling down trains as they spray a vaporized hydrogen peroxide solution. What about these high-tech helpers in this report?
This robot technology is normally used in the hospital and the laboratory to do deep disinfection. But after a staff member at the Mass Transit Railway got ill, their office in Mong Kok East started using a robot. They can either be controlled remotely or given a preset route to follow through areas that may have been contaminated with the virus. MTR Operations Director Tony Lee says robots fill the gap where human cleaners cannot reach to execute the risky task.
The first thing we do is use 1 to 49-bit solutions to clean the environment, but there is still a tiny gap or tiny area that is not easy to reach. Therefore, we keep on deep cleaning day in and day out.
Each robot costs $128,000 each and takes about 4 hours to clean an entire 8-car train. Although the city's transportation companies are doing extra disinfection for the buses and subway, people are still worried.
I think to control the coronavirus outbreak, if the government or public organizations don't implement any strong crowd control measure, only by deploying a machine would not help much to contain the virus.
Hong Kong has had good success at keeping the pandemic in check. With 256 infections and 4 deaths, the city has toughened curbs on travelers, ordering 14 days of quarantine for arrivals.
Well, the United Nations has declared Pakistan second on the rank among happiest countries in South Asia. The UN's World Happiness Report 2020 declared Finland the world's happiest nation for the 3rd consecutive year. The report said Pakistan is at the 29th global position, India at 144, Sri Lanka at 130, and Bangladesh is at 107. Pakistan has made significant improvement as the country was at the 67th position in last year's ranking. Meanwhile, India has slipped 4 ranks from 140 last year, near the bottom of the list of 153 countries ranked. The report collects data on per capita GDP growth, social support, freedom to make life choices, and perceptions of corruption. People around the world are celebrating Noro, which marks the first day of the spring and the beginning of Persian New Year. But the new coronavirus pandemic has overshadowed the celebrations as public gatherings are prohibited. More than 300 million people around the world celebrate Noro, which has been a tradition for over 3,000 years. Iraq Kurds normally celebrate Noro Spring Festival by lighting fires on the top of the mountains and gathering in public squares. But this year, they have been forced to light fires on the roof of their houses due to the coronavirus fears. Nowruz is one of the biggest annual festivals celebrated in Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and other countries on the 21st of March. Grammy-winning country singer Kenny Rogers has passed away at the age of 81. His family said Rogers died from the natural causes. A statement on his website said the legendary singer was surrounded by his family at the time of his death. Rogers embarked on a world farewell tour in 2016, but was forced to cancel some shows in April 2018 due to the health concerns. After beginning his career in the 1950s with a jazz group, Rogers went solo in the 1970s and released his breakthrough single Lucille in 1977. The International Monetary Fund says the impact of the coronavirus pandemic will be severe, but the economic shock will be temporary. IMF's strategy, policy and review head Martin Mulsen said the global economy is more resilient than it was before the 2008 crisis. Mulsen said the long expansionary period and high employment rates mean the global economy should weather the storm. He said the main goal for governments should be to limit the spread of the virus in a way that provides confidence. The official said the authorities have already taken unprecedented measures to provide liquidity to markets to keep them functioning. He said the IMF is working for minimum interest rate loans to help emerging markets deal with sharp capital outflows. In the US, 2 Republican senators have been accused of selling shares before prices dropped over coronavirus fears. Both the senators are facing calls to resign. Senator Richard Burr dumped up to $1.7 million of stocks last month, while Kelly Loeffler sold holdings worth $3 million in a series of transactions on the day the Senate held a briefing on the virus. Both the senators have denied the allegations of impropriety. In a tweet, Loeffler said the allegation is a ridiculous and baseless attack. President Donald Trump told reporters the senators should possibly be investigated. U.S. law makes it illegal for the members of the Congress to trade on the basis of non-public information gathered during their official duties. Time to take a look at the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Thanks for watching.